The text message glared at me from my phone screen. Sis, I need you. It's life or death this time. I mean it. My name is Sloan, and I hadn't spoken to my brother Tom in 3 years. Not since that Christmas dinner when everything fell apart. The last image I had of him was his disappointed face as I walked out of our family home, vowing never to return. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Vanessa. Have you heard about Tom? She asked when I picked up. Just got his text. What's going on? It's all over Facebook. He's in the hospital. Kidney failure. They're saying he needs a transplant. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. He's only 34. Your mom's been trying to reach you. I glanced at my blocked calls list. 15 missed calls from Mom. I can't deal with this right now, I said, pacing my apartment. I have a deadline for tomorrow's story about Sloan. Vanessa cut me off. This isn't another corrupt politician or corporate scandal you can investigate from a safe distance. This is your brother. Half-brother, I corrected automatically, immediately hating myself for it. You need to call your mom back. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the window. The city lights flickered behind my image, reminding me of camera flashes from my first big story. The one that made my father disown me. My phone rang again. This time it was Addison, my editor. Whatever story you're working on, drop it, she said before I could speak. Family emergency trumps deadline. How did you? Small town news travels fast. Go see your brother. I sat down at my desk, pulling up Tom's social media. His latest post was from 3 days ago. Starting dialysis today, keeping the faith. The comments section overflowed with prayers and well wishes. My hands shook as I unblocked my mom's number. She answered on the first ring. Sloan, baby, is that you? Hi, Mom. My voice cracked. Thank God, we've been trying to reach you. Your brother. I know. Facebook. He needs you, honey. We all do. The doctors say family members are the best chance for a match. I closed my eyes, remembering the last time Tom needed me. I was 17. He was 23. He'd gotten into trouble with gambling debts. I'd given him my college savings, made him promise to change. 2 months later, he lost it all again. I can't just drop everything and come home, I said. Your father's different now, Mom said, reading my mind as usual. After your article about the mayor's corruption, he understood why you did it. He's proud of you, even if he won't say it. I laughed bitterly. Right. That's why he told every newspaper in town that his daughter was dead to him. People change, Sloan. Sometimes it takes a crisis to... My phone beeped with another incoming call. Tom. I have to go, Mom. I'll think about it. I switched calls. Tom. Hey, troublemaker. His voice was weak, but he still managed that annoying big brother tone. Guess you heard about my grand finale. Don't talk like that. Why not? You're the one who always said I was dramatic. He coughed. Listen, I know things are messed up between us, but I need my little sister right now, not the hotshot journalist, just my sister. I can't deal with Dad, I said. Then deal with me. I'm the one dying here. The word hit me like a slap. Dying. My brother was dying. The doctors say family members are the best match, he continued. Mom's not compatible. Dad's too old. You're my best shot, Sloan. I looked at the framed article on my wall. My first big expose. The story that made my career and destroyed my family. My father's face in the courthouse. Betrayal in his eyes as I testified against his friend, the mayor. When's the testing? I heard myself ask. Tomorrow morning. Hospitals running special sessions for family members. I grabbed my laptop, pulling up flight schedules. Text me the details. I'll be there. Sloan? His voice softened. Thank you. After hanging up, I called Addison back. I need a week off. Take 2, she said. And Sloan? Remember what I taught you about investigating stories. Follow the facts, not the emotions. No. The other thing. Sometimes the biggest stories are the ones closest to home. I booked the first flight out, then sat in the dark, watching the city lights. Tomorrow I'd face my family again. Tomorrow, I'd walk back into the web of lies and manipulation I'd spent 3 years escaping. But tonight, I had a story to write. Not about corrupt politicians or corporate scandals. About a sister and a brother, and the thin line between love and resentment. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from my father. Coming home at last. Some things never change. I turned off my phone and started packing. The familiar crunch of gravel under my rental car's tires sent chills down my spine. Our family's Victorian-style house loomed ahead, exactly as I remembered it. Pristine white paint, perfectly manicured lawn, and those suffocating rose bushes Mom always obsessed over. I hadn't even turned off the engine when Mom burst through the front door, practically running down the steps. She looked older, grayer, but her arms felt the same when she wrapped them around me through the car window. "You're here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're really here. Had to come, Mom." I tried to smile, but my face felt stiff. "Where's Tom?" "At the hospital for dialysis. Your father's with him." She stepped back, wiping her eyes. "Come inside. You must be exhausted from the flight." The house smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Mom's stress-baking scent. Fresh cookies sat on the kitchen counter, beside a stack of medical papers and insurance forms. "Coffee?" Mom asked, already reaching for my old favorite mug. "Actually, I need to use Dad's office. Check some emails." Her hand froze mid-reach. "Sloan, just emails, Mom. I'm not investigating anything." She sighed. "The office is exactly as you remember it. Your father never changes anything." I climbed the familiar stairs to the second floor, passing family photos I'd rather forget. There I was at graduation, before everything fell apart. Tom at his college graduation, Dad's proud arm around his shoulders. The last family Christmas photo, taken months before I exposed the mayor's scandal. Dad's office door was unlocked. The heavy mahogany desk dominated the room, its surface meticulously organized. I ran my fingers along the edge, remembering how many times I'd stood here as a child, receiving lectures about family loyalty and proper behavior. The desk drawer stuck slightly. It always had. Inside, everything was arranged with military precision. Pens, paper clips, stamps. But something caught my eye. A corner of yellowed paper, peeking out from beneath a stack of files. "What are you doing?" I jumped. Dad stood in the doorway, his frame blocking the light from the hallway. He'd lost weight, but his presence still filled the room. "Checking emails," I said, closing the drawer quickly. "Hospital stuff." He stepped into the room, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. 3 years, Sloan. 3 years without a word. You told me not to come back. And when did you ever listen to what I told you? A hint of a smile played at his lips, but his eyes remained cold. "Your brother's waiting at the hospital, ready to be tested. That's why I'm here." "Is it?" He moved to his desk, straightening papers that were already straight. "Not working on another story." "Dad, don't. Because the last time I came home, I discovered your best friend was embezzling millions from the city." My voice echoed in the small room. "You knew about it and did nothing. I protected this family. You protected your reputation." "Enough." Mom appeared in the doorway, her face flushed. "Tom needs us, all of us. Can we please just focus on that?" Dad straightened his tie, a nervous habit I'd forgotten about. "The car's outside. We should get to the hospital." The drive was silent. I sat in the back seat like a teenager, watching familiar streets roll by. The hospital loomed ahead, a concrete monster swallowing people whole. Tom's room was on the 4th floor. He looked small in the hospital bed, tubes snaking from his arms. His face lit up when he saw me. "Still wearing that ratty leather jacket, I see," he said weakly. I touched the sleeve self-consciously. "Still making bad jokes, I see. Some things never change." He tried to sit up, wincing. "Did you get the testing paperwork?" Mom handed me a thick envelope. "The nurse will be here soon." I started reading through the forms, my journalist's eye catching on details. Blood type requirements, genetic markers, compatibility factors. Something wasn't adding up. Dad, I said slowly. Why aren't you being tested? Age isn't a complete disqualifier for kidney donation. The room went silent. Mom suddenly became very interested in adjusting Tom's pillows. Medical reasons, Dad said shortly. Private ones. What medical reasons? Drop it, Sloan. His voice carried that familiar warning tone. But I couldn't drop it. Something about his reaction, Mom's nervous movements, the way Tom wouldn't meet my eyes. My reporter's instincts were screaming. A nurse entered, breaking the tension. Ready for testing, Miss O'Connor? Yes, I said, still watching my father, very ready. As I followed the nurse out, I glanced back. Dad was at the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. Mom was holding Tom's hand, whispering something I couldn't hear. That yellowed paper in Dad's drawer nagged at my mind. Whatever it was, whatever he was hiding, I would find out. Some things never change, indeed. After the blood tests, I waited until everyone was asleep. The house creaked familiarly as I crept down the hallway to Dad's office, flashlight in hand. My heart pounded as I eased open the desk drawer. The yellowed paper was still there, buried beneath tax forms and insurance documents. As I pulled it out, my phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. How's it going? Can't talk. Investigating. I typed back. Of course you are. Be careful. I unfolded the paper carefully. It was a letter, dated 35 years ago. The first line made my blood run cold. Dear Kirk, I know the baby isn't yours. My hands shook as I read further. The letter was from someone named Maria, talking about an arrangement, money changing hands, a baby boy named Talon. The final paragraph hit like a punch to the gut. I know you and Selena will give him a good home. Please just let me see him sometimes, as we agreed. Find what you're looking for? I spun around. Mom stood in the doorway, her silhouette ghostly in her white nightgown. Mom, what is this? I held up the letter. Who's Talon? She closed the door behind her, hands trembling as she switched on the desk lamp. You were always too clever for your own good, just like your father. Don't deflect. This letter is Tom adopted. Sit down, Sloan. She sank into Dad's leather chair. It's more complicated than that. Then explain it to me. She took a shaky breath. Your father, he had an affair. Before you were born. With Maria, Tom's biological mother. Mom nodded. When she got pregnant, your father paid her to disappear. We took the baby, changed his name to Thomas. No one ever knew. Except you? I couldn't have children then. We'd been trying for years. Her voice cracked. Your father said it was the perfect solution. His mistake could become our miracle. And then you had me. 2 years later, the doctors called it a medical miracle. She laughed bitterly. Your father was so proud. His real child, he called you, though he never said it in front of Tom. My mind raced. Does Tom know? No one knows except your father, Maria, and me. She reached for my hand. And now you. I pulled away. That's why Dad won't get tested. He's not Tom's biological father. Sloan, please. Your father will destroy me if he knows I told you. Destroy you? Like he destroyed Maria. Where is she now? Mom looked away. I don't know. The agreement was that she'd never contact us. Agreement? I spat the word. You mean the payoff? We gave her son a good life. You stole her baby. The door opened. Tom stood there, pale as the hospital sheets he'd left behind. Who stole whose baby? The letter crumpled in my fist. Mom went white. Tom, you should be resting, she stammered. I came down for water, his eyes fixed on the paper in my hand. What's going on? The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. I looked at Mom, but she was frozen, staring at her hands. Your name is Talon, I said finally. And Dad isn't your biological father. Tom, Talon, gripped the doorframe. What? I held out the letter. He read it slowly, his face changing from confusion to shock to something darker. All this time, he whispered. All those stories about how I was your miracle baby. You were, Mom pleaded. You are. Stop lying. He slammed his hand against the wall. My whole life is a lie. Even my name. Keep your voice down, Mom hissed. Your father. He's not my father. Tom's legs buckled. I rushed to catch him as he sagged against the wall. You need to be in bed, I said, supporting his weight. You're still weak from dialysis. How can you be so calm? He demanded. Did you know about this? I just found out. Tonight. He laughed, a horrible broken sound. The great investigative journalist finally found a story worth telling. Tom, no. That's not my name. He pushed away from me, stumbling toward the stairs. I need to get out of here. Wait, Mom called. But he was already halfway down the stairs. I heard the front door slam, then the sound of his car starting. We have to go after him, Mom said, reaching for her keys. No, I blocked her path. You've done enough. I'll find him. Sloan. And when I get back, you're going to tell me everything. About Maria, about the money, about all of it. No more lies. I grabbed my jacket and car keys, my mind already mapping the places he might go. Behind me, Mom called out one last time. What are you going to do? I turned back, seeing her clearly for the first time. Not as my mother, but as a woman who'd lived with this secret for 35 years. I'm going to find my brother, I said. And then, I'm going to find his mother. I found Tom at the old baseball field, where he used to coach Little League. He sat in the dugout, the letter crumpled in his hands, staring at nothing. You shouldn't be out here, I said, sitting beside him. It's freezing. 35 years, he muttered. 35 years of lies. I pulled out my phone, opened my notes app. Mom told me some things about Maria. Don't. He closed his eyes. Don't make this into one of your stories. This isn't about a story. This is about finding your mother. I have a mother, his voice cracked. The one who just admitted to buying me. My phone buzzed, a text from Dad. Where is he? I ignored it. Want to know what I found out already? Tom stayed silent, but his hands stopped shaking. Dad paid Maria $50,000 in 1988. That's almost $120,000 in today's money. I scrolled through my notes. He set up a trust fund in her name, but the payments stopped in 1995. How do you know all this? I have sources at the bank. Called in some favors while driving around looking for you. He laughed hollowly. Always the investigator. There's more. I hesitated. The last known address for Maria was in Seattle. She worked as a nurse there until 2010. Tom's head snapped up. She was a nurse? Still is, according to my sources. Moved to Portland a few years ago. Stop. He stood up suddenly, swaying. I can't process this. Tom, that's not my name. He hurled the crumpled letter across the dugout. God, I don't even know who I am anymore. My phone buzzed again. Dad, your mother is hysterical. Bring him home now. You're my brother, I said firmly. That hasn't changed, hasn't it? He turned to face me. Half-brother, remember. That's what you always said. Guess you were more right than you knew. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the dugout. Dad's Mercedes pulled up to the field. Great, Tom muttered. The man who bought me is here. Dad strode across the field, his expensive shoes inappropriate for the muddy grass. Get in the car, both of you, now. Or what? Tom challenged. You'll buy another son? Dad's face went white. Your mother told you. No, your daughter did. The one you're actually related to. I raised you. You owned me. Tom's voice echoed across the empty field. How much was I worth, Dad? 50,000. Was that the going rate for a baby in 1988? You're sick, Dad said, his voice controlled. You need to be in the hospital. I need the truth. Tom stepped forward, stumbling. I caught his arm. Where is she? Where's my real mother? I am your real father, Dad growled. I changed your diapers, taught you to ride a bike, paid for your college. Paid for everything, didn't you? That's your solution to everything. Throw money at it until it goes away. Dad's face hardened. Get in the car, both of you. We'll discuss this at home. No, I stepped between them. We're discussing it now. Why did the payments to Maria stop in 95? Dad's expression flickered. You've been investigating. It's what I do. Remember, the thing you disowned me for. She broke the agreement, Dad said finally. Tried to contact Tom, sent birthday cards, photos. Tom swayed again, harder this time. His face was pale, sweating despite the cold. Tom, I grabbed his arm. Hey, look at me. I don't. His eyes rolled back. Don't feel. He collapsed. Dad and I caught him before he hit the ground. Call an ambulance, Dad shouted, already pulling out his phone. In the chaos that followed, ambulance sirens, emergency room lights, doctors rushing past, I slipped away to make a call. Addison, I need a favor, a big one. At midnight? My editor sounded wide awake despite the hour. Must be good. I need you to find someone. A nurse in Portland named Maria. She'll be in her 50s now. This about your brother? How did you? Small town, remember. Words getting around about some drama at the hospital today. I watched through the ER window as doctors worked on Tom. Dad paced the hallway, making calls. Mom sat in a plastic chair, looking small and lost. This isn't for a story, I said. It's for my brother. Half-brother. No. I pressed my hand against the cold window glass. Just my brother. Send me what you have. I'll make some calls. I hung up as a doctor approached Dad. Their conversation was intense, with Dad shaking his head repeatedly. What's wrong? I asked when the doctor left. Dad's face was ashen. The kidney damage. It's genetic. Something called polycystic kidney disease. Runs in families. In Maria's family, I said slowly. We need to find her, Dad admitted. She might be a match. I pulled out my phone, showing him Addison's text. Found her. You're not going to believe where she is. Where? Working as a transplant coordinator at this hospital. The hospital cafeteria was empty at 3 a.m., except for a woman sitting alone, staring into a coffee cup. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, her scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. When she looked up, I saw Tom's eyes staring back at me. Maria, she didn't seem surprised. I wondered when you'd find me, Sloan. You know who I am. I've read all your articles. She gestured to the chair across from her. I've kept track of both my children. I sat down, my reporter's instincts warring with my personal feelings. Both. Talon and you. She smiled sadly. Though he goes by Tom now. How long have you been working here? 6 months. She twisted her coffee cup. When I saw his name come up on the transplant list, I requested a transfer. Your father doesn't know. Did you know about his condition? The polycystic kidney disease. It runs in my family. I've been tested. I'm a match. Her hands shook slightly. But I couldn't just walk into his room and announce myself. The agreement with your father. Screw the agreement. I slapped the table, making her jump. He's dying. I know. Tears filled her eyes. Why do you think I'm here? I've been watching him, checking his charts, making sure he gets the best care. From the shadows, like some kind of ghost. What choice did I have? She pulled out her wallet, removed a worn photo. This is the last picture I have of him. His 5th birthday. I took it from far away, at the park. I recognized the playground. Tom on the swings, Mom pushing him, Dad watching proudly. They gave him a good life, Maria said softly. They bought him, like property. Your father gave me a choice, money to start over, or a legal battle I couldn't afford to fight. She met my eyes. I was 22, single, working minimum wage. He was a powerful man with expensive lawyers. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. How's Tom? Stable, I typed back. Found his birth mother, working on a story. Don't you dare, Vanessa replied immediately. This isn't news, it's family. I looked at Maria, really looked at her. The same stubborn chin as Tom. The same expressive eyes. 35 years of watching her son grow up from a distance. He knows about you, I said. She went still. How? I found the letter. In Dad's office. Oh God. She pressed her hands to her mouth. How did he? He collapsed. That's why he's here now. I leaned forward. He needs you, Maria. Not as a secret donor, but as his mother. Your father will never allow it. My father doesn't get to decide anymore. I stood up. Come with me. Where? To see your son. We took the elevator to the 4th floor. Outside Tom's room, Dad was arguing with a doctor. We can't wait for the donor list, Dad was saying. There has to be another option. There is. I stepped forward, Maria beside me. Meet your son's donor. Dad turned, his face draining of color. Maria. Hello, Kirk. Her voice was steady, but I saw her hands trembling. It's been a while. You can't be here. The agreement is void. I cut in. Unless you want me to write about how you illegally bought a baby 35 years ago. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Mom appeared in the doorway, took in the scene. Maria, oh my God. Selena. Maria nodded stiffly. How's our son? Mom flinched at the hour. He's awake, she said quietly. Asking for Sloan. I took Maria's arm. Perfect timing. Wait. Dad stepped forward. You can't just watch me. I pushed past him, leading Maria into the room. Tom lay in the hospital bed, looking pale but alert. His eyes widened when he saw us. Tom, I said softly, there's someone you need to meet. Maria stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Hello, Talon. Tom stared at her for a long moment. Your mother, your birth mother. She touched her face. You have my eyes. And my kidney disease, apparently. She laughed through her tears. Yes, that too. I'm so sorry. Don't be. He reached for her hand. Just tell me everything, please. I backed toward the door, giving them privacy. In the hallway, Dad grabbed my arm. You've gone too far this time. I yanked free. No, Dad. You did the 35 years ago. I'm just fixing your mistake. By destroying this family. By saving it. I pulled out my phone, showed him the draft email to my editor. Your choice. Let them have this moment, or I send this story to every newspaper in the country. He stared at the screen, then at me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. You really would do it, wouldn't you? In a heartbeat. I glanced back at Tom and Maria, deep in conversation. But I don't think I'll have to. You're really going through with this? Vanessa asked, watching me type furiously on my laptop. 3 days had passed since Maria's revelation, and I hadn't left the hospital except to shower and change clothes. The story needs to be told, I said, not looking up. Dad's been making calls, trying to bury it. 2 reporters already backed off after anonymous threats. But it's your family. Exactly. I turned the laptop to show her the draft. Read it. She scanned the first paragraph. In 1988, a prominent local businessman paid $50,000 to purchase a baby boy. Today, that same man sits on the hospital board that may determine whether his illegally adopted son receives a life-saving kidney transplant. Sloan. Vanessa pushed the laptop away. This will destroy your father. He destroyed himself. I hit save. Besides, I'm not publishing it yet. It's insurance. A knock at the door made us both jump. Addison walked in, holding a thick folder. Got what you asked for, she said, dropping it on the bed. Financial records, property transfers, everything from 1988 to now. Your father's been busy covering his tracks. I opened the folder. How bad? Bad enough to end his career, maybe earn him some jail time. She sat on the edge of the bed. You sure about this? Before I could answer, Tom appeared in the doorway, leaning on an IV stand. He looked better than he had in days. Family meeting in my room, he said. Dad's lawyer is here. I grabbed my laptop and the folder. This should be interesting. Tom's hospital room was crowded. Dad and his lawyer stood by the window. Mom sat in the corner chair, and Maria perched on the edge of Tom's bed. The tension was thick enough to cut with a scalpel. Before we begin, the lawyer said, pulling out some papers, I need everyone to sign these non-disclosure agreements. I laughed. Not happening. Sloan, Dad warned. No. I opened my laptop. Either we do this honestly, or my story goes live in every major newspaper by tonight." The lawyer frowned. "Miss O'Connor, that would be inadvisable." "What's inadvisable," I cut in, "is thinking you can silence the truth with legal documents." "The truth?" Dad stepped forward. "You want the truth? I saved that boy's life. His mother couldn't provide for him. I could have tried." Maria stood up. "You never gave me the chance. You took money instead. Because you threatened to destroy me if I didn't." "Stop it." Tom's voice cracked through the room. "All of you, just stop." Everyone fell silent. Tom struggled to sit up straighter. "I've made a decision," he said. "About the transplant." Dad moved closer. "Son, don't call me that." Tom held up a hand. "Maria's a match. She's willing to donate, but I'll only accept on one condition." "Anything," Dad said quickly. "The truth comes out, all of it." Tom looked at me. "Sloan publishes her story." "That's impossible," the lawyer interjected. "The legal ramifications are exactly what you deserve," I said, opening the folder Addison brought. "Wire transfers, fake adoption papers, bribes to officials. Want me to continue?" Dad's face had gone gray. "You'd destroy everything I built. Your own father." "You're not my father," Tom said quietly. "You're the man who bought me. There's a difference." Mom stood up suddenly. "I have something to add to your story, Sloan." "Selena, don't," Dad pleaded. "There were others," she said, her voice shaking. "Other babies, other mothers. I saw the papers, years ago. Kirk didn't just buy Tom. He ran a network." The room went deadly quiet. Even the lawyer looked shocked. "How many?" I whispered, fingers hovering over my keyboard. "At least 6 that I know of." Mom wouldn't look at Dad. "All between 1985 and 1990. "You knew." Dad's voice was barely audible. "All this time, I knew everything." She finally met his eyes. "Every lie, every payoff, every threatened mother. I kept quiet to protect our family, but this is protecting no one." I was already typing, my journalist's mind racing. "I'll need names, dates." "You'll have them," Mom said. "All of them." The lawyer was gathering his papers, backing toward the door. "I think we need to reconvene when everyone is calmer." "Sit down," Tom and I said, simultaneously. He sat. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, still typing. "Dad, you're going to make a full confession. Names, dates, everything. Mom and Maria will corroborate. In return, I'll emphasize in the story that you're cooperating fully with authorities. And if I refuse, then I publish what I have now, and you face the consequences alone." Dad looked around the room, at Mom's determined face, at Maria's quiet strength, at Tom's unwavering stare, at my fingers poised over the keyboard. "When did you become so ruthless?" he asked softly. I met his eyes. "I learned from the best." He sat heavily in the chair by Tom's bed. "Where do you want me to start?" "The beginning," Tom said. "Start with the truth." The story broke on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, our front lawn was crowded with news vans and reporters. I watched from Tom's hospital room as Dad was led out of his office in handcuffs, the scene playing live on the small TV mounted on the wall. "Turn it off," Tom said, but he couldn't look away either. The reporter's voice filled the room. "Local businessman arrested in connection with illegal adoption ring. Sources say at least 12 families were affected." Maria muted the TV. "The other mothers are coming forward. 3 have already contacted the police." "Good," I said, checking my phone. "Addison says the story's gone national. Every major network wants interviews." "With Dad?" Tom asked. "With us, all of us." I looked at Maria. "Especially you." She shook her head. "I can't. The transplant surgery is tomorrow. We need to focus on that." The door opened and Mom walked in, looking exhausted. She'd aged years in the past week. "They're searching the house," she said, sinking into a chair. "Found more documents in the safe. Names, birth certificates." "God, Kirk, what were you thinking?" "He wasn't thinking about the families," Maria said quietly. "Only about the money." A nurse came in to check Tom's vitals. "Looking good for tomorrow," she said cheerfully, ignoring the tension in the room. "Both donor and recipient are in excellent condition." "Thanks, Sarah." Tom managed a smile. After she left, Mom turned to Maria. "Are you sure about this? The donation? After everything? He's my son." Maria took Tom's hand. "I've missed 35 years. I won't miss this chance to help him." My phone buzzed. A text from Dad's number, but sent by his lawyer. "Your father wants to see you both before tomorrow's surgery." "No," Tom said immediately. "He's at the county jail," I read. "Says he needs to tell us something important." More lies? "Maybe we should hear him out," Mom suggested, "for closure, if nothing else." 2 hours later, Tom and I sat across from Dad in the jail's visiting room. He wore an orange jumpsuit instead of his usual tailored suit, but his posture was still rigid, controlled. "You look terrible," he said to Tom. "Kidney failure will do that." Dad flinched. "The other families, they're being notified?" "By the police," I said, though most of them probably saw it on the news. Good." He straightened his shoulders. "There's something else you need to know about the money. The bribes?" I pulled out my notebook. "No, the trust funds." He leaned forward. "I set one up for each child, including you, Tom. The original 50,000, plus interest. It's been gathering dust for 35 years. Tom's face hardened. "Blood money. It's yours. Both the fund and my share of the company. I signed everything over this morning." "I don't want it." "Then give it to charity, set up a foundation for the other families." "I don't care." Dad's composure cracked slightly. I need to know I did one thing right." "One thing right?" Tom's voice rose. "You stole babies from their mothers. You destroyed families. I gave them better lives. You played God." Tom stood up, swaying slightly. I grabbed his arm to steady him. "Tomorrow, my real mother is giving me her kidney. Not because she bought me, but because she loves me. Do you even know what that means?" Dad's face crumpled. For the first time in my life, I saw him cry. "I thought I was helping," he whispered. "I thought money could fix everything." "It can't fix this," I said. "But the truth might help." "The truth?" He laughed bitterly. "The truth is, I loved you both, in my own twisted way, even if I didn't deserve to." Tom turned away. "We should go. Surgery's early tomorrow." "Wait." Dad pressed his hand against the glass partition. "Tom, Talon, whatever name you choose, I'm sorry for everything." Tom paused at the door. "Save your apologies for the other families. They deserve them more than I do." Back at the hospital, Maria was waiting with Mom. They'd been looking at old photos, Maria's secret collection of Tom growing up, taken from afar. "How did it go?" Mom asked. "He apologized," I said. "Too little, too late," Tom added, but his voice was tired rather than angry. Maria helped him back into bed. "You need to rest. Big day tomorrow." As she fussed with his pillows, I saw Tom watching her with a mix of wonder and sadness. 35 years of lost moments, compressed into these few precious days. "Hey," he said suddenly, "after the surgery, would it be okay if I tried calling you Mom?" Maria's hands froze. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." Mom slipped out of the room quietly. I followed her to the hallway, where she leaned against the wall, shoulders shaking. "It's okay," I said, hugging her. "You're still his mom, too." She wiped her eyes. "I know. We all have to learn to share now, even love." Inside the room, I could hear Tom and Maria laughing about something. It sounded like healing. The surgery was successful, Dr. Roberts announced to our anxious group in the waiting room. Both patients are in recovery. Mom collapsed into her chair, while Vanessa hugged me tight. Through the recovery room window, I could see Tom and Maria in adjacent beds, both groggy but alive. "Maria's kidney function is excellent," the doctor continued, "and Tom's body is accepting the transplant well. We'll monitor them closely, but I'm optimistic." I pulled out my phone, opened my email. The final draft of my story waited in the outbox, ready to be sent to Addison. But something felt unfinished. I need to add something, I told Vanessa. Watch them for me? In the hospital cafeteria, I rewrote the ending. Not about Dad's arrest or the other families coming forward, though that was important. Instead, I wrote about Maria's gift, about how love could heal what money had broken. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. One of the other mothers, asking to meet, then another and another. What are you going to do? Vanessa asked, reading over my shoulder. Help them find each other, I said, all of them. Back in recovery, Tom was awake enough to smile. Did it work? Perfect match, I said, squeezing his hand. Just like the DNA test proved. Maria stirred in the next bed. How's my boy? Your kidney's working great, Mom, Tom said. The word came naturally now. Mom appeared in the doorway with coffee and a newspaper. The headline read, "Local adoption scandal leads to national investigation." They're calling it the biggest adoption fraud case in state history, she said, handing me the paper. Your story did that. Our story, I corrected. We all told the truth finally. Not all of us, Tom said quietly. Dad still hasn't named all the families. He will. I showed them my phone. These mothers who are reaching out? They're not angry anymore. They just want to know their children are okay. Like I was, Maria said softly. All those years, just wanting to know you were happy. A nurse came in with medication. As she checked their IVs, Tom reached for both Mom's and Maria's hands. I've been thinking, he said. About names. Oh? Maria tried to sit up straighter. I want to keep Tom. It's who I've been my whole life. He squeezed their hands. But maybe Talon could be my middle name. Tom Talon. Mom tested it out. It's strong. Like both sides of who I am, he said. My phone buzzed again. Addison. Final draft? I looked at my family, all of them, complicated and messy and healing, and typed back, almost, need to add one more thing. The nurse left and Maria turned to Mom. Thank you, she said, for giving him a good life when I couldn't. Thank you for giving him life twice, Mom replied. Once then, once now. I added their words to my story, then a final paragraph. The truth isn't always simple. Sometimes it has many mothers, many names, many versions. But when we finally face it, when we let it heal instead of hurt, it can build something stronger than any lie. Send it, Tom said, reading over my shoulder. I hit send, then put my phone away. Outside the window, the sun was rising. A new day, a new kidney, a new truth. So what happens now? Vanessa asked. Now? I smiled at my brother, my whole healing brother with 2 mothers and 2 names. Now we become the family we always should have been. Plus about 12 other families, Tom added, referring to Dad's other victims. The more the better, Maria said. I've waited 35 years for a family reunion. Speaking of reunions, Mom pulled out her phone. 3 more mothers called. They want to meet their children. Good, I said, because I have an idea. Tom groaned. Here we go. A foundation, I continued, using Dad's money, to help separated families find each other, to make something good from something terrible. The Truth Project, Maria suggested. Perfect. I reached for my laptop. Let's start now. After rest, the nurse said firmly, returning to shoo us out. We left Tom and Maria to sleep, their matching hospital bracelets catching the morning light. In the hallway, Mom stopped me. You did good, Sloan, she said. You broke the story, but you also helped fix what was broken. We all did, I said, by telling the truth. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Dad's lawyer. He's ready to talk about all of them. I showed the message to Mom. She nodded. Go, she said. There are more families waiting for their truth. I headed for the elevator, but not before looking back one more time. Through the window, I could see Tom and Maria sleeping peacefully, connected by more than just a kidney now, connected by truth, by choice, by love. That was the real story, and it was just beginning.
Hi, I'm Anna. My life took a sharp turn 5 years into my marriage with Paul. We were your average couple. I was a teacher, he was a manager at an energy company, and life was pretty straightforward. Then, his dad passed away, leaving his mom, Elaine, all alone in their family house. It was then that Paul dropped the bombshell. "Anna, we need to talk," Paul said abruptly one night, his tone serious enough to make me pause mid-scroll on my phone. I looked up. "What's up? Everything okay?" He took a deep breath. "It's about Mom. She's alone in that old house since Dad passed. I think we should move in with her." I felt my stomach drop. Move in with Elaine? She and I were like oil and water. "Paul, are you serious? You know Elaine and I barely get along." He leaned against the kitchen counter, his expression firm. "I know, but she's my mom, and she's struggling. Plus, we're just burning money on this rented apartment." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "But this is our space, our home. Moving in with your mom, it's a whole different ball game." Paul's voice took on a pleading edge. "Please, Anna. It's not just about the space. It's about family. Mom needs us." I bit my lip, feeling cornered. "Your mom needs us or you need your mom?" He frowned. "That's not fair, Anna. It's not like I'm asking you to live in a dump. It's a huge house, plenty of room for all of us." I crossed my arms, feeling the tension rise. "And what about our life here? Just uproot everything because Elaine snaps her fingers?" Paul's tone hardened. "It's not like that, and you know it. I'm thinking about what's best for everyone." I shot back. "Everyone or just Elaine?" He threw his hands up in frustration. "Damn it, Anna, can't you just try to see the bigger picture here?" I glared at him. "I am looking at the bigger picture, Paul. Our life, our independence. Not just playing happy families in that gloomy old house of hers." The argument went in circles, but eventually, I caved. For Paul. For the sake of peace. But deep down, I dreaded every bit of it. Moving day came, and it was as uncomfortable as I imagined. Elaine's house was this imposing, old structure with rooms that echoed and a constant chill in the air. Elaine greeted us with a stiff smile. "Welcome to my home. I expect you to respect my ways." I forced a smile, trying to keep the peace. "Of course, Elaine. We appreciate you letting us stay." But living with Elaine was like living with a hawk. She had a comment for everything. "Don't put the dishes away like that," or, "You're overwatering the plants." It was relentless. One night, after a particularly harsh critique on my cooking, I exploded to Paul in our room. "I can't do a damn thing right for your mother. It's like living with a drill sergeant." Paul rubbed his temples, looking equally frustrated. "Anna, just give it time. She's old and set in her ways." I threw my hands up. "Great, so we just tiptoe around her till the end of time?" He didn't have an answer, and honestly, neither did I. This house, with its constant surveillance and Elaine's scrutinizing eyes, was suffocating. Life in Elaine's house was turning into a daily grind. Just when I thought I could handle it, Paul dropped another bombshell. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, and I was trying to find some peace in the garden when he came out. "Anna, we need to talk," Paul said, leaning on the garden gate. I looked up, feeling a knot in my stomach. "What now, Paul?" He took a deep breath. "I think you should quit your job and stay home. We're spending a fortune on a nurse and housekeeper for Mom. It makes more sense." I stood up, anger rising. "Quit my job? Paul, I love teaching. It's not just about the money." He ran his hand through his hair, his tone getting edgy. "I know, but think about it. It'll make things easier around here." I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. "So, what? I just become a full-time maid and nurse? That's not the life I want." Paul's voice rose. "It's not about what we want, Anna. It's about what's practical. My mom needs us. I glared at him. No, your mom needs you. I didn't sign up to be her caretaker. He shot back. Well, things change, Anna. We need to adapt. Adapt. That word felt like a slap. I loved my job, my independence. This wasn't adapting, this was sacrificing. You know what, Paul? Fine, I'll do it. But don't expect me to be happy about it. He sighed, a look of relief crossing his face. Thank you, Anna. It means a lot. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like I was losing a part of myself. Quitting my job was hard, but the days that followed were harder. I was now a full-time housekeeper, nurse, and cook. Elaine, as always, had her 2 cents to add about everything. Those curtains need a wash, she'd say, or, the soup is too salty. It was endless. One day, I snapped. Elaine was criticizing the way I ironed her clothes, and I couldn't take it anymore. Elaine, can you just stop? I'm doing my best here. She looked taken aback. Well, I'm sorry if I have standards, Anna. I threw the iron down, my voice shaking with frustration. I'm not your servant, Elaine. I'm your son's wife. I'm here trying to help, and all you do is criticize me. There was a moment of tense silence, and then Elaine's expression softened slightly. I know you're trying, Anna. I'm just used to things a certain way. I sighed, feeling the tension drain out of me. I know, Elaine. But I'm not you. I have my way of doing things. From that day on, things were slightly better. Elaine toned down her criticisms, and I tried to accommodate her quirks. It was a fragile truce, but it was better than the constant battles. As time dragged on in Elaine's house, the atmosphere grew tenser, almost suffocating. Paul's behavior became increasingly distant and elusive. He was always late from work, and when he was home, he might as well have been invisible, holing up in the spare room like it was his sanctuary. One evening, unable to bear the silence and distance anymore, I cornered him in the kitchen. Paul, what's going on with you? You're hardly here, and when you are, it's like you're not even my husband anymore. He avoided eye contact, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. Work's a nightmare right now, Anna. Just piles of stress. I leaned back against the counter, my arms folded. I get stress, Paul. But this feels like you're shutting me out. You're here, but you're not really here. He exhaled heavily, his gaze still fixed on his coffee. I don't know what you want me to say, Anna. I'm just really tied up with stuff. I wanted to believe him, to understand, but something inside me screamed that there was more to it. Then there was Lucy, Paul's sister, who made it her mission to add to the tension. Each visit from her was a trial. She'd look around the house with a sneer and quip, still stuck in this old dump, huh? I usually bit my tongue, but one day her taunts hit a nerve. Not all of us have the luxury to mooch off others, Lucy. I shot back. She just cackled, her voice grating on my nerves. Oh, look at you, playing the martyr in a haunted house. Pathetic. I clenched my jaw, holding back a barrage of words. Paul, ever the silent bystander, offered no defense. His silence was like another jab, another confirmation of the growing gulf between us. The biggest shift, however, came with Elaine. One day, she called for Lucy, her voice frail and desperate. Lucy, I need help with a bath. I can't manage on my own anymore. Lucy's response was cold and cutting. Help yourself, Mom. I'm not your caretaker. Elaine broke down in tears, and my heart couldn't take it. Despite our rocky history, I couldn't leave her in that state. I helped her with the bath, and something between us changed that day. Elaine started to warm up to me, treating me less like an intruder and more like a daughter. It was a welcome change, but it also highlighted how far Paul and I had drifted apart. The house felt colder, emptier, despite Elaine's newfound warmth towards me. The walls seemed to echo with the growing silence between Paul and me, a chasm that seemed to widen with each passing day. The chill in our home grew colder each day. Paul's late nights at work became a norm, and our conversations turned into mere whispers of their former selves. It was during one of these fleeting interactions that Paul dropped a new piece of news that would add to the growing pile of secrets and lies. "Anna, I got an apartment near work," he said nonchalantly, as if he was talking about the weather. I almost dropped the dish I was cleaning. "An apartment? Why on earth would you need that?" He leaned against the door frame, avoiding my gaze. "It's just practical, Anna. Saves me the commute, especially with the late nights." I felt a surge of anger and confusion. "And you just decided this without talking to me? What are we, roommates now?" He shrugged, his indifference cutting deep. "I thought you'd be happy, less stress about me coming home late." I shook my head, disbelief coloring my tone. "Happy? Paul, this feels like you're living a double life. What's next? You'll tell me you have a second family there?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Don't be dramatic, Anna. It's not like that." I wanted to push further, to break through his nonchalant facade, but I knew it was futile. The conversation ended there, as did many of our conversations those days. The true shock came a few days later, in a candid conversation with Elaine. We were in the living room, sharing a rare moment of calm, when she suddenly said, "You know, Paul didn't buy that apartment with his money." I looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then continued, "He used my savings. He said it was an investment. He even put it in my name." I felt my heart sink. "He's been using your money? And you're okay with this?" Elaine shrugged, a sad look in her eyes. "I couldn't say no. He's my son. But I thought you should know." I was speechless. Paul's secret apartment was one thing, but using his mother's savings, and under the guise of an investment? It felt like the man I married was slipping away, replaced by this stranger with secrets and lies. A few days later, I confronted Paul about it. "Paul, why didn't you tell me the apartment was bought with your mom's money?" He was unapologetic, almost defiant. "Because I knew you'd react like this. It's an investment, Anna. It's not a big deal." I couldn't believe his audacity. "Not a big deal? You're gambling with your mom's savings. And keeping it from me? What else are you hiding?" He turned away, ending the conversation with a dismissive wave. "You wouldn't understand, Anna. It's business." Business. That word felt like a chasm between us, an excuse for everything that was going wrong in our marriage. Living in Elaine's old, dreary house was taking its toll on me. The walls, once probably vibrant, now echoed a somber tone, and every creaking floorboard seemed to whisper secrets. One day, I just couldn't take it anymore. "Elaine, have you ever thought about renovating the house?" I asked over breakfast. It could use some freshening up. Elaine looked up from her tea, surprised. "Renovate? I haven't thought about it in years. It's such a big task." I nodded, feeling a spark of enthusiasm. "I know, but it could really brighten up the place. Maybe just start with a new coat of paint or some new wallpaper." Elaine considered it for a moment. "Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to bring some new life into this old house. But are you sure you're up for it?" I smiled, eager for a project. "Absolutely. It'll be a good change." And so, it began. I threw myself into the renovation, painting walls, choosing wallpapers, and even attempting to restore some of the old furniture. It was hard work, but it felt good, like I was breathing life back into the house and, in a way, into myself. One day, while I was up to my elbows in paint, Paul walked in. He looked around, his expression one of shock and disbelief. "What the hell, Anna? What are you doing to my mom's house?" I stood up, wiping the sweat from my brow. "I'm renovating, Paul, like I told Elaine. It's time this place got a little love and care." Paul's face reddened. "You had no right to start changing things without asking me. This is my family home, not some DIY project." I felt my temper rise. "Your home? When was the last time you even cared about this place, Paul? I'm doing something good here. He took a step closer, his voice rising. You're overstepping, Anna. You always do this, take control and push everyone else aside. I stared at him, incredulous. Take control? Paul, I'm trying to make this gloomy place livable. Maybe if you spent more time here, you'd see that. Before Paul could retort, Elaine walked in. What's all this noise about? Paul turned to her. Mom, did you know about this? About her changing the house? Elaine looked from me to Paul, then back again. Yes, I did. And I'm glad she's doing it. This house needed a change, and Anna's doing a wonderful job. Paul looked like he'd been slapped. But it's our family home. Elaine cut him off, her tone firm. It's my home, Paul. And I want this. Anna has every right to do what she's doing. Paul stormed out of the room, leaving me and Elaine in an awkward silence. I felt a mix of victory and sadness. The house was transforming, but the gap between Paul and me seemed to only grow wider. The day Elaine suffered her stroke, our world turned upside down. I was there, witnessing her sudden decline, her words slurring, her body weakening. Panic gripped me as I called for help, my voice quivering with fear. In the hospital, the grim reality set in. Elaine needed constant care. I looked to Paul for support, but he was distant, his eyes void of the son's concern I expected to see. Anna, I can't deal with this. I have enough on my plate, he said, his voice cold. I was stunned. You can't deal with this? Paul, she's your mother. He shrugged, his response cutting like a knife. Yeah, and she's been a burden for years. This is just the cherry on top. I couldn't hide my disgust. She's not a burden, Paul. She's family. She needs us. His laugh was bitter. Us? No, Anna. She needs you. I've got other things to handle. I was left speechless, my respect for him sinking. I took it upon myself to care for Elaine. It was hard, watching the once strong woman confined to a bed, dependent for every little thing. As I became Elaine's primary caregiver, Paul's visits grew rarer, and his indifference more apparent. His visits were short, his conversations with Elaine, brief and superficial. Then Lucy came. I overheard them in the living room, their words like venom. We should start thinking about the will, dividing the assets, Lucy said, her voice devoid of any emotion. I burst into the room, fury coursing through my veins. How can you be so heartless? Discussing her will right in front of her? She's still here. Lucy smirked, her words sharp. Oh, look who's talking. The saintly daughter-in-law. This is our family's matter. Stay out of it. Paul chimed in, his voice laced with cynicism. Anna, just drop it. It's practical to plan these things. No use pretending she's gonna bounce back. I was aghast at his cruelty. Practical? She's your mother, Paul. How can you be so callous? He shrugged, his reply cold and detached. Life's callous, Anna. Better get used to it. I turned away, my heart heavy with disgust. The following weeks, I dedicated myself to Elaine's recovery, and to my surprise, she showed signs of improvement. Her fingers twitched, her speech cleared, she even managed a few steps. It was a miracle to me, but a nuisance to Paul and Lucy. Their true colors were now vividly clear, their mother's plight was nothing more than an inconvenience, a hurdle in their path of inheritance. The betrayal stung deep, not just as a daughter-in-law, but as a human being. Life had settled into a grim routine. Elaine's health was a constant roller coaster, with small victories overshadowed by the looming fear of the worst. Then, it happened. Another stroke, this time more severe. The call from the hospital felt like a punch to the gut. Elaine didn't make it. The funeral was a somber affair. I stood beside the grave, my heart heavy, watching as people paid their respects. That's when Paul arrived, and with him, a woman I didn't recognize, and two small kids clinging to her hands. Who's she? I whispered to myself, my eyes fixed on the unfamiliar woman. Paul approached, his expression unreadable. Anna, this is Carol, my wife. And these are our kids. I felt like I had been slapped. Your wife? When did this happen? He shrugged, a coldness in his voice. A while ago. It's none of your business, Anna. I was speechless, my mind reeling. How could he? And during all this time with Elaine. Lucy was there too, her usual sneer in place. Finally showing your true colors, Anna? Playing the grieving daughter-in-law? It's a bit late for that. I glared at her, my voice laced with contempt. I was here for Elaine when you both abandoned her. Don't you dare judge me. Paul interjected, let's just get this over with. We have other matters to discuss after. The funeral ended, and the gathering moved to Elaine's house for the will reading. Paul and Lucy were like vultures, eagerly awaiting their share. The lawyer began reading the will, and that's when the bombshell dropped. Everything, the house, the money, all of it, was left to me. Paul's face went from smug to shocked. What the hell? This can't be right. Lucy was fuming. This is bullshit. She was our mother. How could she leave everything to this nobody? I stood there, stunned, not sure how to feel. Happy? Vindicated? It all felt hollow. Paul turned to me, his voice filled with accusation. You manipulated her, didn't you? Turned her against us. I shook my head, disbelief and anger mixing in my voice. I did nothing but care for her, which is more than I can say for you. The lawyer intervened. Elaine was very clear in her will. Lucy was seething. This is not the end. We'll contest this. There's no way we're letting her get away with this. As they left in a huff, I stood there, alone in the house that was now legally mine. The walls that had witnessed so much pain, betrayal, and love. I looked around, feeling the weight of Elaine's last act of kindness, and the burden of a broken family's scorn. The house felt different now, like it was echoing with Elaine's last wishes. I was sitting there, holding the will, still trying to get my head around everything. Elaine had left it all to me, and Paul and Lucy were raging mad about it. They came back the next day, all fired up. You really think you can just take everything? Paul burst out as soon as he stepped in. I looked up, tired but standing my ground. Elaine decided this, Paul. It was her choice. Lucy was red in the face, yelling, You tricked a sick old lady. We won't let you get away with this. I stood up, fed up with their nonsense. Tricked? I was there for her, unlike you two. She chose to leave it to me. Paul was fuming. So, you think you've beaten us? You think you can just snatch everything away? I let out a heavy sigh. I didn't snatch anything, Paul. Elaine gave it to me because she knew I actually cared. Their yelling didn't stop, but it was just noise against the truth I knew. I was there for Elaine when they weren't. The lawyer showed up with a video Elaine had made. Her voice filled the room, and she said it clear as day. I left everything to Anna because she was like the daughter I never had. She was there when my own kids weren't. She deserves it all. The room went quiet. Paul looked like he'd been punched in the gut, and Lucy started crying, finally realizing what they had done. After that, Paul and Lucy left, and all their threats just fell flat. I was alone in the big house, surrounded by the past and thinking about the future. I decided to divorce Paul. It was tough, but it had to be done. He and his new family had to move to a rental place. Lucy had her own mess to deal with, her debts and bad choices were catching up to her. As for me, I was standing in my new house, feeling sad but also kind of excited. Elaine's will wasn't just about the house and money. It was like she was telling me to be strong and make my own way. I decided to start over, use what Elaine left me to build something new for myself. The house, once a reminder of tough times, was now a place for new beginnings. I'm Clara, 32, a stay-at-home mom. Let me tell you about the worst period of my life that began 2 years ago. It was a time when my world, already rocked by a tragedy, got hit by a betrayal so deep it almost broke me. Life back then was simple, revolving around my 4-year-old, Jamie, and my husband, Mark. Mark was always neck-deep in work, managing stuff for a company with branches everywhere. But the real anchors of my life were my in-laws, Sarah and John. They weren't just in-laws, they replaced my parents. It was during this period, my own folks died in a nasty car crash. It was a gut punch, the kind that leaves you gasping for air and struggling to stand. I was a mess, a complete wreck. That's when Sarah and John stepped in. They weren't just in-laws, they became my lifeline. "Clara, we're here for you, always," John had said, his voice steady but his eyes wet. He was a tough guy, but he had a heart of gold. Sarah was softer, always had a hug ready. "You're our daughter now, more than ever," she'd whisper as she held me while I sobbed. They helped with Jamie, took care of the house, basically kept me from falling apart. But just when I thought I'd hit rock bottom, life decided to throw me another curveball. It was Lisa, a family friend, who broke the news to me. She's blunt, always has been. "Clara, listen, I hate to be the one to say this, but there's talk about Mark. They say he's seeing someone else." I remember laughing it off at first. "That's bullshit, Lisa. Mark wouldn't, he just wouldn't." But deep down, a part of me knew. When Mark came home that night, I confronted him straight up. "So, what's this crap I'm hearing about you screwing around, Mark?" He didn't even have the guts to look me in the eye. "Clara, it's not what you think," he mumbled, but I knew better. I felt like I was getting sucker punched all over again. First, my parents, now this? It was like some sick joke. That's where my story starts. In the middle of a life that felt like it was crumbling around me. 2 years ago, I lost my parents and then had my heart ripped out by the man I thought I knew. Welcome to my mess. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee in front of me, when Mark walked in. His face was a picture of guilt, but I was past caring. "So, you're a cheat now, Mark? Is that it?" I spat the words out, not caring about the venom in them. Mark flinched, but he deserved it. "Clara, it's not that simple," he said, trying to sound reasonable, but to me, he just sounded pathetic. "Not simple? You screw around while I'm crying over my dead parents, and you say it's not simple?" My voice was shaking with rage. He sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I was stressed, Clara. I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything." I laughed, but it was bitter and hollow. "Didn't mean anything? You shattered our family, Mark, and you say it didn't mean anything?" He tried to reach out to me, but I jerked away. "Don't. Just don't. How long, Mark? How long have you been lying to me?" He hesitated, and that was all the answer I needed. "It started a few months ago. Clara, I'm sorry. I really am." The word sorry stung. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Mark. You've broken us." I couldn't stay in the same room as him. I walked out, leaving him standing there, looking like a man who knew he'd screwed up beyond repair. Later, I went over to Sarah and John's place. I needed someone to talk to, and they were the closest thing to parents I had. Breaking the news to them was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I sat them down in their cozy living room, the place where I'd spent countless happy hours. "Sarah, John, I have to tell you something about Mark." Their expressions changed from warmth to concern. "What is it, dear?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with worry. "It's Mark, he's been having an affair." Saying the words out loud made them real, and it hurt like hell. John's face turned to stone, his hands balled into fists. "That blackguard," he growled. "After everything we've been through, he does this to you." Sarah was crying, her hands trembling. "Oh, Clara, how could he? We thought he was better than this." I couldn't hold back my tears. "I don't know what to do. I feel so lost. John stood up, pacing the room. I'll talk to him. I'll make sure he knows what a colossal mistake he's made. If he does something like that again, I will disinherit him. But I wasn't sure there was anything to be said or done. The trust was broken, and I didn't know if it could ever be mended. The days after finding out about Mark's affair were a mess of emotions. I was angry, hurt, and felt betrayed. But in the middle of that storm, Mark was desperate, almost pathetic, begging for another chance. One evening, he cornered me in the living room, his face worn out with guilt and fear. "Clara, please, I'm begging you. I know I messed up, big time. But I can't lose you and Jamie over this." I looked at him, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "You should have thought about that before jumping into bed with someone else, Mark." He winced, as if my words were physical blows. I know. It was a stupid mistake. I never meant to hurt you." "Mistake?" I scoffed. "You called destroying our family a mistake?" He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he had. "I'm not trying to make excuses. I want to make things right. Please, Clara." I wanted to scream, to tell him how much he had hurt me, but instead, I found myself thinking of Jamie, our little boy who adored his dad. "Mark, you don't just get to come back and pretend everything is fine. You broke something here," I said, my voice heavy with unspoken pain. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to fix it, if you let me," he pleaded. I sighed, feeling the weight of the decision on my shoulders. "I'll think about it, Mark. But even if I agree, things will never be the same again." He nodded, looking like a man who knew he was hanging by a thread. "I understand. Thank you, Clara." The next day, I talked to Sarah and John about it. I needed their perspective, their advice. John was furious, his old-school values making it hard for him to see past the betrayal. "Clara, you can't just let him off the hook. He needs to learn his lesson." Sarah was more understanding, though her disappointment in her son was clear. "Clara, dear, whatever decision you make, we'll support you. But think about Jamie, and what's best for him." Their words echoed in my head as I made my decision. I wasn't doing this for Mark. I was doing it for Jamie, and maybe, a little bit, for the memory of what Mark and I used to have. That night, I told Mark my decision. "I'm willing to give this another shot, Mark. But things need to change. We need to start over, rebuild what you broke." Mark's relief was palpable. "Anything, Clara. I'll do whatever it takes." 2 years had passed since I decided to give Mark another chance. It felt like walking on a tightrope every day, balancing between the past and a future I wasn't sure about. Mark got a promotion at work, which meant more business trips, more time away from home. It left me with Jamie and a lot of time to think. One day, while Jamie was at school, I sat with Sarah and John in their garden, a place where we had shared so many family moments. "Clara, you've been holding up well, considering everything," Sarah remarked, her voice laced with concern. I forced a smile. "I'm trying, Sarah. For Jamie's sake." John, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. "You know, Clara, I still can't wrap my head around what Mark did. But I respect you for giving him another chance." I sighed, looking at the garden's blooming flowers. "I don't know if it was the right decision, John. Sometimes, I feel like I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop." "We're here for you, no matter what," Sarah said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I appreciated their support, but deep down, I felt alone. Mark's frequent travels didn't help. Whenever he was home, it was like living with a stranger. We talked, but it was mostly about Jamie or mundane things. One evening, I decided to confront Mark about this distance between us. He had just returned from a trip and was sitting in the living room, scrolling through his phone. "Mark, we need to talk," I said, standing in the doorway. He looked up, a hint of weariness in his eyes. "What's up?" "It's about us. I feel like we're just coexisting, not really living as a couple," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark put his phone down, his expression turning serious. Clara, I'm trying. I'm working hard for us, for our family. But is that enough, Mark? We hardly talk, and when we do, it's like we're just going through the motions, I replied, frustration creeping into my voice. He stood up, coming closer. I know it's been hard, Clara, but I'm doing the best I can. I shook my head. I'm not sure if your best is enough anymore. We stood there, the distance between us more than just physical. I wanted to believe that we could get back to where we once were, but as each day passed, that hope faded a little more. Life in the Smith household had settled into a routine, a mundane pattern of day-to-day activities, with Mark frequently away on business trips and me juggling household chores and caring for our son Jamie. The joy and spontaneity that once filled our home seemed to have evaporated, leaving behind a sense of mechanical existence. One afternoon, while visiting Sarah and John, something happened that I hadn't anticipated. We were sitting in their cozy living room, sipping tea and chatting about trivial matters, when Sarah, ever the attentive mother-in-law, gave me a curious look. Clara, dear, you've been looking a bit pale lately. Everything all right with your health? Sarah's tone was laced with genuine concern. I forced a smile, not wanting to worry her. Oh, I'm fine, Sarah. Probably just a bit tired from running around after Jamie. She wasn't convinced and leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. You're not, by any chance, expecting, are you? Her question caught me off guard, and I laughed it off. No way, Sarah. That's definitely not on the cards right now. However, her words planted a seed of doubt in my mind. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that my recent tiredness and nausea could be signs of pregnancy. On my way home, I made a detour to the pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. The next morning, after Jamie had left for preschool, I took the test. The minutes I spent waiting for the result felt like hours. When I finally looked at it, the 2 pink lines were as clear as day. I was pregnant. I was still reeling from the shock when Mark returned from his latest business trip. He looked weary, his suit crumpled and his eyes tired. I hesitated for a moment before deciding to tell him the news. Mark, we need to sit down. There's something important I need to tell you, I said, my voice trembling slightly. He frowned, a look of concern crossing his face. What's wrong, Clara? Is it Jamie? No, it's not Jamie. I'm pregnant, I said, watching him closely for his reaction. He stood there, stunned, as if trying to process what I'd just said. Then, slowly, his expression shifted to one of confusion and concern. Pregnant? Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. I took a test this morning, I replied, feeling a knot form in my stomach at his less than enthusiastic response. Mark ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of unease. Wow, that's great news. It's just so unexpected. His words lacked conviction, and I felt a pang of disappointment. I thought you'd be happier, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He quickly tried to reassure me. I am happy, Clara, really. It's just a lot to take in right now, with everything going on at work. I nodded, trying to mask my disappointment. The joy of discovering my pregnancy was overshadowed by the growing distance between us. The following day, I shared the news with Sarah and John. Their reaction was heartwarmingly different. Sarah's eyes lit up with joy, and she enveloped me in a warm embrace. A new grandchild. Oh, Clara, this is such wonderful news, she exclaimed, her voice brimming with excitement. John's reaction was equally enthusiastic. This is a blessing, Clara, a beautiful addition to our family. Their happiness was infectious, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to bask in the joy of the new life growing inside me. The joy of expecting was tinged with the bittersweet realization that the child would be born into a family where the parents were more like strangers than partners. The mix of emotions was overwhelming, leaving me to wonder about the future of our family. The days at home had turned into a never-ending cycle of monotony, with Mark always off on some business trip or another, leaving me to handle everything alone. It was during one of these dull, repetitive days that my in-laws, John and Sarah, decided to shake things up. I was over at their place, mechanically sipping tea while Jamie was playing with his toys, when John dropped a bombshell. "Clara, you're going to Hawaii. It's all sorted," he announced, like he was talking about a trip to the local grocery store. I nearly spat out my tea. Hawaii? Now? But Mark, he doesn't even know. John's response was blunt and to the point. "Forget about Mark. He's got his own stuff. This is about you and Jamie getting some much-needed fun." Sarah nodded in agreement, her expression serious. "You've been cooped up in that house for too long, Clara. A change of scenery will do you good." I tried to argue, to reason, but they weren't having any of it. I couldn't even reach Mark to tell him about the trip. Calls went straight to voicemail, and my texts disappeared into the void, unacknowledged, unread. So, there we were, Jamie and me, heading off to Hawaii on a whim, thanks to my in-laws, with Mark completely in the dark. The whole thing felt like a crazy dream. Landing in Hawaii felt surreal. The hotel was like something from a postcard, exactly how Sarah had described it. "It's a family tradition," she had said. Jamie was ecstatic, his laughter and energy contagious. But as I watched him play, a pang of loneliness hit me. "Why isn't Daddy here, Mommy?" Jamie asked, his innocent question twisting the knife a bit more. "He's busy, baby," I replied, keeping my voice light. "But we're going to have a great time, just us." Every night, I'd send updates to Mark, photos of Jamie building sandcastles, the stunning Hawaiian sunsets, but they went unanswered. His silence was a loud, echoing confirmation of the growing gap between us. The days were a blur of beach outings and hotel adventures with Jamie, yet I felt disconnected, my mind constantly wandering back to Mark. Then came the shocker. On our penultimate morning, I walked down to the hotel lobby, and there he was. Mark. And he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him, someone I didn't recognize, laughing at something he said. I froze, my heart pounding. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not in the very place Sarah and John had cherished. The shock was like a slap in the face. I couldn't believe my eyes. The moment I saw Mark with that woman, my world stopped. Panic gripped me as I grabbed Jamie's hand, rushing him back to our hotel room. He was babbling about the pool and the fun he had, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Once in the room, I quickly got Jamie settled with his favorite toys and stepped out onto the balcony, dialing a number with trembling fingers. "I need you here in Hawaii," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, trying to keep the desperation at bay. I spent the rest of the day on that balcony, like a sentinel watching over a battlefield. Below, Mark and his mistress were living it up, oblivious to the pain they were causing. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice as I watched them laugh, touch, and share moments that were meant to be mine. That night, sleep was a stranger. My mind was a whirlwind of hurt and anger, replaying the scene over and over. The betrayal felt raw, cutting deep into the core of what I believed our life together was. The next morning, I left Jamie with the sitter and made my way to the hotel restaurant, where I saw Mark and the woman having breakfast, still in their little bubble. I marched up to them, fury coursing through my veins. "Mark, what the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. Mark's head snapped up, and the color drained from his face. "Clara, this isn't what it looks like. Don't insult me. I'm not blind," I shot back, glaring at the woman beside him. She looked uncomfortable, fidgeting in her seat. "Who are you?" I asked her, my voice icy. She stuttered, her eyes darting between me and Mark. I'm Lisa, I didn't let her finish. "Well, Lisa, you've been sleeping with my husband. Congratulations." Mark tried to intervene. "Clara, please, let's not do this here." "Why not, Mark? Afraid of a little scene?" I challenged, my voice dripping with scorn. The woman, Lisa, quickly stood up, mumbling an apology before scurrying away. Mark reached out to me, his eyes pleading. "Clara, I can explain. Please, just don't tell my parents." As if on cue, John and Sarah walked into the restaurant. Seeing the scene, they quickly pieced things together. Mark's face turned ashen. John's voice was cold and hard. "What's going on here, Mark?" Mark stammered, "Dad, I can explain." Sarah looked from Mark to me, her expression one of shock and hurt. "Clara, what's happened?" I took a deep breath, the weight of the betrayal heavy on my chest. "Mark's been having an affair. I caught them together." The words hung in the air, heavy with disappointment and pain. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes brimming with tears. John's face was a mix of anger and disbelief. John was the first to speak, his voice laced with a bitterness I had never heard before. "Enough of this nonsense, Mark. We're tired of your antics. You've pushed us too far this time." Sarah stood beside him, her expression one of utter disappointment. "We've stood by you through everything, but this is unforgivable." Mark, looking like a deer caught in headlights, tried to appeal to them. "Mom, Dad, please." But John cut him off. "No, Mark. We're done. You're out of the house. It belongs to us, and we won't harbor a cheater under our roof. And as for the inheritance, don't expect a dime." Mark's face crumpled. He looked from his parents to me, a desperate plea in his eyes. "Clara, please." I shook my head, feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. "It's over, Mark. I'm filing for divorce." The trip back from Hawaii was a blur. Once home, I set the wheels in motion for the divorce. The proceedings were quick, but every signature, every paper served was a reminder of the life I thought I'd have. The court granted me alimony for both Jamie and our unborn daughter. Mark was ordered to provide for both children, his actions leaving him alone and distanced from the family he once had. When our daughter was born, a beautiful baby girl, it was a bittersweet moment. She was a symbol of a new beginning, but also a reminder of everything that had fallen apart. Throughout it all, John and Sarah were my pillars of strength. They helped with the kids, giving me the support I desperately needed. "You're not just our daughter-in-law, Clara. You're our daughter, and we'll be here for you and the kids," Sarah would often say, her kindness a soothing balm on my wounded heart. Life settled into a new routine. Raising 2 kids alone was challenging, but with John and Sarah's help, it was manageable. We became a close-knit unit, bound by love and mutual respect, a stark contrast to the broken family we once were. Mark became a distant figure, an occasional visitor in the kids' lives, but the warmth and closeness we once shared were gone, replaced by a polite, distant co-parenting arrangement. As I watched my children play in the yard, John and Sarah sitting nearby, chatting and laughing, I realized that this was my new normal. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was a life filled with love and support. In the end, that was all that mattered.
My name is Lily, a 27-year-old nurse, and my world changed when I met Mark, a charming patient with a broken leg at the hospital where I worked. After a few months of dating, he surprised me with a proposal, and I was elated. However, meeting his family, especially his mother, Margaret, was a day I dreaded, and for good reason. We arrived at Mark's family home on a sunny Saturday afternoon. The house was large and imposing, a stark contrast to my modest upbringing. I clung to Mark's arm, seeking some comfort as we rang the doorbell. Margaret opened the door, her expression neutral. "You must be Lily." "Come in," she said, leading us into a lavishly decorated living room. The air was stiff with formality. As we sat down, Margaret began her interrogation. "So, Lily, Mark tells us you're a nurse. That's a noble profession. And your parents, what do they do? I cleared my throat, feeling her piercing gaze on me. My mother works as a saleswoman in a department store. She's been doing it for years. And your father? Margaret pressed on, her tone suggesting she was digging for something more. I felt my cheeks warm up with embarrassment. I never knew my father. My mom raised me by herself. Margaret's eyes widened, and her lips pursed in disapproval. You mean you're a child of a single mother? No father figure? How peculiar. And no telling what kind of man your father was. Could have been a criminal or mentally unstable. I sat there, stunned, feeling a rush of emotions: embarrassment, anger, hurt. Mark, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up, his voice tinged with anger. Mom, that's enough. Lily's family background doesn't matter. I love her. But Margaret continued, undeterred. Mark, you must think about the implications. A girl from such a background. It's not suitable. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like a bad dream. I wanted to defend myself, but the words wouldn't come out. Mark stood up, his face red with anger. Mom, I can't believe you're saying this. Lily is the woman I love, and I won't stand for you talking about her like that. Margaret shrugged, her expression cold. I'm just stating the obvious, Mark. It's for your own good. The rest of the visit passed in awkward silence. We left soon after, but Margaret's words echoed in my head. The ride home was quiet. Mark kept apologizing, but the damage was done. The aftermath of meeting Margaret left me uneasy, but I tried to shake it off as Mark and I started planning our wedding. Eager to mend bridges, I decided to personally send out invitations to Mark's relatives, including Margaret, hoping for a fresh start. One evening, as I was finalizing the guest list, Mark sat beside me, looking over the names. Do you think my mom will come, after everything? He asked, a hint of concern in his voice. I hope so. Maybe this will help smooth things over, I said, trying to stay optimistic. A few days after mailing the invitations, I received an unexpected call from Mark's grandmother. Her voice was hesitant, laced with regret. Lily, dear, I'm afraid I have some bad news, she began. What is it? I asked, a sense of dread building up. It's about the wedding. None of us are coming. I'm so sorry, but Margaret called everyone. She said some awful things about you, spreading rumors, and then begged us not to attend, she confessed. I was stunned. But why would she do that? I asked, feeling a mix of anger and disappointment. She's convinced you're not right for Mark and is doing everything to stop the wedding, the grandmother explained. Mark overheard and took the phone. Grandma, is this true? Did Mom really say all that? Yes, Mark. I'm so sorry. We all are, she replied sadly. After hanging up, Mark was seething with anger. I can't believe she'd go this far. This is unacceptable. I felt a wave of humiliation and sadness. She's trying to ruin our wedding, Mark. What do we do? Mark took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. We'll still have our wedding, Lily. Just us and a couple of friends as witnesses. We don't need anyone who doesn't support us. I nodded, appreciating his support but still feeling the sting of rejection. Okay, let's do that. A small, intimate wedding. We proceeded with our plans, but the joy of preparing for our big day was overshadowed by Margaret's actions. Despite the setback, we were determined to celebrate our love, even if it meant having a wedding without Mark's family. Our modest wedding, though not what we initially planned, was beautiful in its own right. However, the real challenge came during a family dinner hosted by Margaret a few weeks later. I had hoped that, over time, she would come to accept me, but that night proved otherwise. As we sat around the dinner table, surrounded by Mark's relatives, the atmosphere was tense. Margaret, as if on cue, began her subtle jabs. "So, Lily, I heard your wedding was quite the small affair. Budget constraints, I presume?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescendence. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment. "We wanted something intimate and personal," I replied, trying to keep my composure. Margaret smirked, "Or perhaps it's because you couldn't afford anything grand. It must be tough on a nurse's salary." Mark, sitting beside me, clenched his fists under the table. "Mom, that's enough. We're happy with how our wedding went." But Margaret was relentless. "I just find it amusing, dear. Marrying into our family and yet unable to host a proper celebration. It says a lot about your background." The room fell silent, everyone avoiding eye contact. I felt isolated and humiliated, the weight of her words crushing me. Mark stood up, his voice raised in anger. "Mom, stop it. You're being incredibly rude and disrespectful to my wife." Margaret shrugged, feigning innocence. "I'm just stating the obvious, Mark. It's clear she married you for financial stability." I felt a lump in my throat, fighting back tears. Mark took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "That's it, we're leaving," Mark announced, his voice steady but filled with disappointment. We got up, and as we walked to the door, I turned to Margaret. "I may not come from wealth, Margaret, but I have something money can't buy: integrity and love. Something you clearly lack." The drive home was quiet, the air filled with unspoken words. Mark kept apologizing, but the humiliation I felt at that dinner was a bitter pill to swallow. That night, lying in bed, Mark spoke softly. "I'm sorry about my mom, Lily. I never wanted you to go through this." "I know, Mark. But it's not your fault. We'll get through this, together," I said, finding strength in our unity. After the ordeal with Margaret, I knew I had to make a positive change in our family dynamics. My first step was to connect with Mark's grandmother, a sweet elderly lady who had always shown me kindness. I decided to use my nursing skills to help her with her medical needs and, hopefully, bridge the gap in the family. The following week, I started my mission. I visited her with my medical kit in hand, feeling a mix of determination and nervousness. "Grandma Jane, I thought I could help with your injections and checkups. I know it's been hard for you to get to the clinic," I said as she welcomed me into her cozy living room. She looked at me, a bit surprised but pleased. "That's very thoughtful of you, Lily. I appreciate it," she said, her eyes twinkling. As I prepared her medication, we began to chat. "How have you been feeling lately?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light and friendly. "Oh, old age doesn't come alone, but I manage. Tell me, how is married life treating you?" she inquired, her voice warm. "It's good, Grandma. Mark is wonderful. We've had some ups and downs with the family, but we're happy," I replied honestly, carefully giving her the injection. She winced slightly but then smiled. "I've heard about the troubles. I don't approve of how you've been treated, Lily. It's not right." I sighed, finishing up with her injection. "Thank you. It's been tough, but I'm trying to make the best of it. From then on, our visits became a regular occurrence. Each time, I'd help her with her medical needs and spend some time chatting. We bonded over shared interests, like gardening. She showed me her beautiful garden, and we spent hours talking about different plants and flowers. "Did you know that marigolds are supposed to keep pests away?" she once told me, her face lit up with enthusiasm. "No, I didn't." "That's really interesting," I replied, genuinely enjoying our conversations. One day, as I was leaving, she took my hand. "Lily, I want you to know that I see you as part of this family. You're a good person, and you make my grandson happy." Her words warmed my heart. "Thank you, Grandma. That means so much to me." Our relationship grew stronger with each visit. Mark noticed the change too. "I can't believe how much Grandma likes you. She always asks about you," he said one evening, a smile on his face. "It's nice. She's a wonderful person. I think we understand each other," I responded, feeling a sense of achievement. Through my efforts with Grandma, I had started to mend the rift in Mark's family. It was a small victory, but it gave me hope that, in time, the others might see me for who I truly was. It was a long journey ahead, but I was ready to face it with patience and determination. Encouraged by my growing bond with Grandma Jane, I decided to reach out to Mark's cousins, Sarah and Emma. I had met them briefly before, but we never really got the chance to know each other. I thought a friendly gesture might help break the ice, so I invited them out for coffee. We met at a cozy cafe one Saturday afternoon. Sarah and Emma looked a bit hesitant at first, but I was determined to make a good impression. "Thanks for meeting me here. I thought it'd be nice for us to get to know each other a bit more," I started, smiling warmly. Sarah, the more outspoken of the two, tilted her head slightly. "Yeah, we were a bit surprised by the invite, given everything that's been going on." Emma nodded, looking a bit uncomfortable. "We've heard a lot from Margaret. It's been awkward, to be honest." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "I know there's been a lot of talk. I just want you both to know that I really care about Mark and being part of the family." We chatted about various topics, slowly easing into a more comfortable conversation. I learned about their hobbies, their jobs, and shared some of my own experiences. "You're actually pretty cool, Lily. We only ever heard one side of the story," Sarah admitted, sipping her coffee. Emma chimed in, "Yeah, I think we misjudged you based on what we were told. It's nice to see a different side." Feeling a sense of relief, I suggested, "Maybe we can hang out more often?" "I'd really like that." Both Sarah and Emma smiled. "We'd like that too," they responded in unison. From that day on, we started to build a friendship. We'd go out for movies, have lunch together, and soon I was part of their close circle. They even began to defend me in family gatherings when Margaret tried to make sly remarks. One evening, as Mark and I were having dinner at home, I told him about my progress with his cousins. "Sarah and Emma are really great. We've been hanging out quite a bit." Mark looked up, a smile spreading across his face. "That's awesome, Lily. I'm glad you're getting along with them. I think it's important for you to have allies in the family." After forging a bond with Mark's grandmother and cousins, I felt a newfound confidence. It was time to reach out to the broader circle, his aunts, uncles, and other relatives. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined. One Sunday, Mark and I hosted a small barbecue at our place. We invited his extended family, hoping for a relaxed setting to break down barriers. Surprisingly, most of them accepted the invitation. As our guests arrived, I could sense their curiosity and a bit of hesitation. Mark's Aunt Carol was among the first to arrive. I greeted her warmly at the door. "Welcome, Aunt Carol. We're so glad you could make it," I said, offering her a friendly smile. She studied me for a moment, then smiled back. "Thank you, Lily. This is quite a lovely home you have here." During the barbecue, I made an effort to chat with each of them. Uncle Mike, who was known for his love of gardening, found common ground with me as we discussed different plant varieties. "So, you're into gardening too, Lily?" he asked, intrigued. "Yes, I love it. There's something so peaceful about working with plants," I replied, sharing my experiences. Mark's cousin, Jenna, joined our conversation. "I've heard some things from Grandma about you. Seems like you've been a big help to her." I nodded. She's a wonderful person. I enjoy spending time with her. As the afternoon went on, the initial awkwardness gave way to laughter and shared stories. I helped serve food and made sure to engage in conversations, showing them the real me, not the version Margaret had painted. Toward the end of the event, Aunt Carol pulled me aside. "Lily, I'll be honest, we heard a lot from Margaret, but today showed us a different perspective. You're nothing like what she described." Her words were a victory, small but significant. "Thank you, Aunt Carol. I just want to be part of the family and make Mark happy," I said, feeling a sense of accomplishment. After everyone left, Mark wrapped his arms around me. "You did great today, Lily. Everyone seemed to really enjoy your company." "I think we made some progress," I said, hopeful. "Maybe, over time, they'll see that I'm not the person Margaret claims I am." Each conversation, each shared laugh was a step towards a better relationship with them. It wasn't just about disproving Margaret, but about creating a family bond based on truth and understanding. The Christmas season approached, and surprisingly, Margaret extended an invitation to Mark and me for a family dinner. Despite our reservations, we decided to accept, hoping for a peaceful holiday. The evening arrived, and the house was beautifully decorated. Margaret welcomed us with a forced smile. "Lily, dear, I need help in the kitchen. Would you mind?" I nodded, albeit reluctantly. "Of course, Margaret." As I followed her into the kitchen, she started delegating tasks. "Could you handle the salad and set the table? I want everything to be perfect." I busied myself with the tasks, trying to stay positive. The relatives began to arrive, filling the house with chatter and laughter. The tension was palpable when we all sat down for dinner. Margaret stood up, glass in hand, for a toast. "I'd like to say something before we begin," she announced, her voice loud and clear. Everyone fell silent, anticipating her words. "I would like to ask Lily to leave. She is an unnecessary addition to our family gathering," she declared, looking directly at me. The room erupted in murmurs of shock. Mark stood up, his face red with anger. "Mom, what are you doing? This is unacceptable." But before he could continue, I placed a hand on his arm, signaling him to let me handle it. I stood up, facing the family, my voice calm but firm. "I understand that I am not welcomed by everyone here. So, I will leave. But I want to extend an invitation to anyone who wishes to join us at our home. We would be happy to celebrate Christmas with family who appreciate and respect us." To my surprise, one by one, the relatives began to stand up. Aunt Carol was the first to speak. "I think I'll take you up on that offer, Lily." Uncle Mike and several others followed. "We're coming too," they chimed in. Margaret sat there, stunned, as almost every guest stood up to leave with us. In our home, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. Laughter and cheerful conversation filled our living room as we celebrated with those who chose to join us. Later in the evening, as we were all enjoying dessert, Margaret's number flashed on my phone. I could hear her angry voice, but I chose to turn off the phone and focus on the joyous occasion around me. After the Christmas fiasco at Margaret's house, our celebration at home turned out to be a delightful affair, full of warmth and laughter. The night was winding down, and the atmosphere was relaxed, with everyone sharing stories and enjoying each other's company. That's when we heard a knock on the door. Mark glanced at me, a questioning look in his eyes, before he went to answer it. I followed him, curious about the late-night visitor. Standing there, in the cold night air, was Margaret. Her face was a mix of anger and desperation. "Mark, I demand to be let in. This is ridiculous, turning your mother away on Christmas," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mom, after what you did tonight, I can't let you in. You hurt Lily and embarrassed us in front of the whole family," Mark replied, his stance firm yet his voice filled with regret. "But I'm your mother. How can you choose her over me?" Margaret's voice cracked, revealing a hint of vulnerability. "It's not about choosing, Mom. It's about respect and love, something you've consistently denied Lily," Mark said, his voice steady. I stepped forward, feeling a mix of pity and resolve. "Margaret, I've always wanted to be part of this family, but not at the cost of my dignity." She looked at me, her eyes searching for something, perhaps a sign of weakness or a chance to argue. But finding none, she let out a sigh, a mixture of defeat and bitterness. "Fine, have it your way. Enjoy your perfect little family," she said bitterly before turning away and disappearing into the night. Mark closed the door quietly and turned to me, his eyes filled with an apology he didn't need to voice. Back in the living room, the mood had shifted slightly, but Aunt Carol broke the silence. "You two are strong together. Don't ever let anyone come between that," she said, smiling kindly. "We won't, Aunt Carol, we won't," Mark replied, wrapping an arm around me. That night, as we cleaned up after the guests had left, Mark and I reflected on everything that had happened. It was a bittersweet realization that sometimes, in order to find peace, one must stand firm against those who disrupt it, even if they are family. In the days that followed, life returned to normal, but the events of that Christmas left a lasting impact on us. We learned the importance of setting boundaries, the value of respect in relationships, and the strength that comes from standing united in the face of adversity. Margaret's actions had, inadvertently, brought us closer to the rest of Mark's family. And while we hoped for reconciliation one day, we knew that our little unit, built on love and respect, was strong enough to weather any storm.
I'm Lisa, a 42-year-old economist. My life is a series of routines and solitude, quite the opposite of my best friend Julia's vibrant social whirl. She's always been the outgoing one, unlike me, who's always shied away from the limelight. Julia's married to a businessman, Robert, and they're quite the social butterflies, hosting parties and gatherings, a scene I usually avoid. One evening, while I was settling in with a book, my phone rang, breaking the silence of my apartment. It was Julia, her voice full of excitement. "Lisa, you have to come to our party next weekend," she blurted out as soon as I answered. I hesitated, feeling the familiar twinge of social anxiety. "Oh, Julia, you know I'm not one for parties," I replied, hoping she'd let it go. But Julia wasn't one to give up easily. "Come on, Lisa, it'll be fun. Plus, there's someone I really want you to meet," she insisted, a hint of mystery in her voice. Despite my reluctance, Julia's enthusiasm was infectious. Okay, I'll come. But I'm not staying late, I conceded, already dreading it. You're going to love it, I promise, Julia said before ending the call. The night of the party, I found myself standing awkwardly in a corner of Julia's lavish living room, clutching a glass of wine for comfort. The room buzzed with laughter and chatter, a stark contrast to my quiet corner. As I was planning my escape, I bumped into a man as I turned around. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see you there, he apologized with a warm smile. No, it's my fault. I tend to blend into the background, I said, offering a small smile in return. He extended his hand. I'm Michael. And you are? Lisa, I replied, shaking his hand. A friend of Julia's. Small world, I'm here thanks to Robert, Michael said, his easy manner making me feel slightly more at ease. We started talking, and surprisingly, I found myself enjoying the conversation. Michael was a preacher with a TV presence, a fact that intrigued me. He spoke of his son, Chris, who lived with him, and I shared a bit about my work and love for quiet evenings. The days following Julia's party were filled with a new, unfamiliar excitement. Michael and I had exchanged numbers that evening, and to my surprise, he called the next day. His voice over the phone was just as warm and inviting as it had been in person. Hi Lisa, it's Michael. I really enjoyed our talk at the party. Would you like to grab coffee sometime? He asked. I hesitated, not used to such attention, but the memory of our pleasant conversation prompted me to accept. Sure, coffee sounds nice, I replied, a hint of nervousness in my voice. We met at a quaint cafe downtown, a place far removed from the bustling atmosphere of the party. Sitting across from Michael, I found myself opening up about my life and work, something I rarely did with someone I had just met. So, what's it like being an economist? Michael asked, his eyes showing genuine interest. It's mostly numbers and analysis. Not as exciting as preaching to a crowd, I'm sure, I responded, feeling a bit self-conscious. He chuckled softly. Well, each to their own. I find solace in sharing words of faith, but we all have our paths. As we talked, I learned more about his life as a preacher and his son, Chris. He's at university now. It's just me at home. It gets quiet, you know, he shared. I nodded, understanding the feeling all too well. I can imagine. I've always valued my quiet space, but it can get lonely. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and before we knew it, a couple of hours had passed. As we parted ways, Michael said, I'd really like to see you again, Lisa. You're easy to talk to. Flattered and a bit taken aback, I agreed to meet again. Over the next few weeks, our casual meetups became a regular occurrence. We shared stories, laughed, and slowly, a connection formed, one I hadn't experienced before. It was during one of these meetings that Michael broached the subject of his son, Chris. I worry that he might not take well to me seeing someone. He's quite protective since his mother passed, he admitted. I felt a twinge of anxiety at the thought. I understand. It must be hard for him, I said, wondering how I would fit into their lives. To my relief, when I eventually met Chris, our introduction went smoother than I had anticipated. He was polite and friendly, and to my delight, we found common ground in our love of books. The relationship with Michael blossomed into something beautiful and unexpected. It was a whirlwind of emotions, and before I knew it, Michael proposed. It was a simple yet heartfelt moment, one that marked a new beginning for both of us. Marriage was never something I had actively sought, considering my reserved nature and preference for solitude. Yet, with Michael, it felt right. His kindness, warmth, and the connection we shared made me believe in the possibility of a shared life. The months following Michael's proposal were like a dream. I, Lisa, who had always cherished my solitude, found myself eagerly diving into this new chapter of life. Our wedding was a modest but beautiful affair, attended by close friends and family, including Julia, who seemed genuinely happy for me. One evening, a few weeks after the wedding, as Michael and I sat on our porch, I shared my thoughts. I never imagined I would be here, in this moment, married and so content, I said, looking out at the starlit sky. Michael took my hand, his voice soft with affection. Life is full of surprises, Lisa. I'm just glad that this surprise brought you into my life. As a preacher's wife, I found myself attending various church events and social gatherings, a stark contrast to my previous lifestyle. At first, it was overwhelming, but Michael was always by my side, his presence a comforting constant. One Sunday after his sermon, as people mingled around the church hall, I overheard snippets of conversation praising Michael's eloquence. Your husband has a way with words. You must be so proud, one of the churchgoers commented as she passed by me. I smiled, feeling a sense of pride. Yes, I am. Thank you. Life with Michael was filled with small, joyful moments. We often hosted dinners where Michael's charm and charisma shone. Julia and Robert were frequent guests, and Julia would often pull me aside, gushing about how happy she was for me. You've really come out of your shell, Lisa. Michael's been so good for you, Julia remarked one evening as we set the table for a dinner party. I laughed softly. I guess love does change people. I'm just glad it changed me for the better. However, with Chris heading off to university, the house felt emptier, and I sensed a subtle change in Michael. He seemed more distant, lost in thought, and our conversations, once filled with laughter and shared stories, now often lapsed into silence. One night, as we sat quietly in the living room, I tried to breach the growing gap. Is everything okay, Michael? You seem different, I asked, concerned. He looked at me, his eyes reflecting a complexity of emotions. It's just the house feeling empty without Chris, and the church demands. Don't worry, Lisa, we'll adjust. I wanted to believe him, to believe that this was just a phase and that we would soon return to our blissful, loving days. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts, fears that this change might be the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. The subtle changes in Michael that I had initially dismissed as mere adjustments to our new life together began to evolve into something more concerning. After Chris left for university, the house, once filled with his youthful energy, grew quiet, almost somber. Michael's demeanor changed, the warmth and affection he used to show me seemed to diminish, replaced by an irritable and distant attitude. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Michael walked into the kitchen. I noticed his furrowed brow and tense expression. Is everything all right, Michael? I asked tentatively. He glanced at the stove and then back at me, his voice sharp. Why isn't dinner ready yet? I'm tired of waiting every evening. Taken aback by his tone, I replied, I'm sorry, the roast is taking longer than I expected. It's always something, isn't it? He retorted before walking away. I stood there, stirring the pot, feeling a mix of confusion and sadness. This wasn't the Michael I knew, the man who used to appreciate my cooking and the effort I put into our home. As days turned into weeks, these instances became more frequent. Michael's criticisms grew harsher, and his patience shorter. There were times when he would come home late, and if dinner wasn't hot, he would react angrily. One such night, when dinner had gone cold, Michael's reaction was more intense than usual. This is unacceptable, Lisa. If I come home, I expect a hot meal, he scolded, his voice raised. But Michael, you didn't tell me you'd be late. I can warm it up, I suggested, trying to keep my voice calm. No, I want a freshly cooked meal. Is that too much to ask? He snapped, his demeanor intimidating. I felt a lump form in my throat as I watched him discard the meal I had spent hours preparing. I nodded silently, holding back tears, and began to prepare another dish. As the nights grew longer and lonelier, with Michael often staying out late, I found myself missing the man I had married. The man who preached about love and kindness seemed to be a different person behind closed doors. As the days passed, my life with Michael descended further into a pattern of isolation and despair. The man I had married, who had once been my source of joy and companionship, now seemed like a distant, cold stranger. His once warm and affectionate nature was replaced by a harsh and critical demeanor, leaving me feeling alone and trapped in a loveless marriage. One evening, as Michael returned home late again, I nervously waited for him with dinner ready, hoping it would be to his liking. The moment he entered, I could sense his discontent. "This is what's for dinner?" "It's practically the same as last night," Michael remarked, a tone of annoyance in his voice. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I thought you liked this dish, Michael. I can make something else if you want." "No, just leave it. I'm not in the mood for your cooking tonight," he said dismissively, walking away from the table. I stood there in the kitchen, the untouched plates of food in front of me, fighting back tears. The loneliness and despair were overwhelming, and I longed for someone to talk to. I picked up the phone and called Julia, hoping for some comfort. "Julia, it's Lisa. I don't know what to do anymore. Michael is so different now. He doesn't even eat the meals I prepare," I shared, my voice trembling. "Oh, Lisa, you're probably just overthinking things. Michael's a good man. Maybe you're just not used to being married yet," Julia responded, her tone lacking the empathy I desperately needed. "But he's hardly ever home, and when he is, all he does is criticize me." "It feels like he doesn't care at all," I said, hoping she would understand the gravity of my situation. "Lisa, marriage is about compromise. Maybe try talking to him, see what's bothering him." "I'm sure it's nothing serious," Julia suggested, not fully grasping the depth of my unhappiness. I hung up the phone, feeling more isolated than ever. Julia, whom I had always counted on, couldn't see the pain I was in. It seemed like I had no one to turn to, no one who understood. I started to question my own judgment, wondering if this was all my fault, if there was something I could have done differently to prevent Michael's transformation. But deep down, I knew I had done everything I could. The problem wasn't with me, it was with the man who had vowed to love and cherish me but now treated me like a stranger in my own home. The transformation in my home was stark and disheartening. Michael, once a source of comfort and joy, had become a stranger, his demeanor increasingly marred by late-night drinking and unpredictable outbursts. It was a gradual shift, one that I had tried to deny at first, but the evidence was becoming too overwhelming to ignore. One fateful evening, the air in our home was charged with an uneasy tension. Michael had returned later than usual, the effects of his drinking evident in his staggered walk and slurred words. I had learned to tread lightly on these nights, but nothing could have prepared me for what was to come. As I placed dinner on the table, an attempt to inject some normalcy into the evening, Michael's frustration boiled over. "This again? Can't you make anything else?" he slurred, his voice dripping with disdain. Attempting to maintain a semblance of calm, I replied, "I thought this was your favorite, Michael. I can make something else if you prefer." In a sudden fit of rage, Michael flung his phone in my direction. I stumbled backward, the phone narrowly missing me, but in my retreat, I knocked over the dinner spread, sending plates and food crashing to the floor. He let out a scornful laugh. "Look at the mess you've made. Clean it up," he commanded before staggering off to the bedroom, leaving me alone in the wreckage. Tears welled in my eyes as I began to pick up the pieces. That's when I noticed Michael's phone, lying amidst the mess, unlocked and unguarded. A part of me knew that crossing that boundary could change everything, but the need for truth, for some understanding of Michael's change, compelled me forward. I picked up the phone and there it was, a string of messages between Michael and Julia. "Can't wait to see you again, missing you, Lisa suspects nothing," the words blurred as tears welled up in my eyes. The betrayal was twofold, my husband and my best friend, two people I had trusted implicitly, were stabbing me in the back. My heart sank as I read each line, a mix of affectionate exchanges and plans for secret rendezvous. I sat there, amidst the chaos, the phone in my hand a testament to their betrayal. Feelings of hurt, anger, and disbelief swirled within me. How could they do this to me? How long had this deception been going on right under my nose? In that moment, I decided to keep this revelation to myself. I needed time to process this betrayal and to plan my next steps carefully. This knowledge was a weapon, and I needed to wield it wisely. I cleaned up the kitchen, my mind racing with the implications of what I had just discovered. The man I had loved and the friend I had trusted had both deceived me in the most intimate way possible. Sleep eluded me that night as I lay in bed, the truth gnawing at me. The next day was a blur, my interactions with Michael mechanical and devoid of emotion. He seemed oblivious to the storm raging inside me, a storm fueled by his own duplicity. Several days after the revelation of Michael's affair, the atmosphere at home had become unbearable. His late-night arrivals and the palpable tension between us escalated into frequent verbal attacks. I knew I couldn't endure this any longer, it was time to take a stand. One evening, as Michael launched into another tirade over some trivial matter, I interrupted him, a newfound resolve in my voice. "Enough, Michael. I can't do this anymore," I said firmly, holding out an envelope. "These are divorce papers." Michael stopped mid-sentence, his anger giving way to shock. "Divorce? Are you serious, Lisa?" "Yes, I am," I replied, my voice unwavering. "I know about your affair with Julia. I'm not going to hide it anymore. It's over." Michael's demeanor changed from shock to desperation. "Lisa, please, think about this. You can't do this to me. It will ruin my career as a preacher. My reputation will be destroyed." "I've thought about it plenty, Michael. Your career and reputation are no longer my concern. I deserve better than this," I stated, my tone resolute. He began to beg, his voice tinged with panic. "Lisa, I'm begging you. Please don't do this. We can work this out." "No, Michael. There's nothing left to work out. You broke our vows, and I won't stay in a marriage built on lies," I responded, my decision clear. Michael's face contorted with anger, his voice rising. "Fine. Go ahead with your divorce. But remember, you won't get a cent from me. I'll make sure you're left with nothing, out on the streets." As I stood there, absorbing his harsh words, he delivered a final, cruel blow. "You're just a fool, Lisa. Just as stupid as my dead wife." At that moment, the door opened, and Chris, Michael's son, stepped into the room. I didn't tell my husband that I invited my stepson to stay for a few days. The moment Chris stepped into the room, the dynamic shifted dramatically. His face was a mask of shock and anger, a stark contrast to his father's blustering fury. "What did you just say about Mom?" Chris demanded, his voice quivering with rage. Michael, caught off guard by his son's sudden appearance, tried to regain his composure. "Chris, this is not what it looks like. We were just..." "Save it, Dad." "I heard everything." Chris cut him off, his eyes burning with anger. "How could you say such things? About Mom, about Lisa?" I stood there, watching the confrontation unfold, my heart pounding. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of all the pain and betrayal. "Chris, you don't understand. It's complicated," Michael attempted to explain, his voice faltering. "Complicated? You're cheating on Lisa, and you insult her and Mom in the same breath. What's complicated about that?" Chris shot back. Michael's face was a mixture of frustration and defeat. He looked at me, then at Chris, realizing that his usual tactics weren't going to work this time. "Chris, listen to me. Your stepmother is exaggerating things. She's trying to turn you against me," Michael said, attempting to regain control. "I'm not a kid anymore, Dad. I can see what's happening," Chris replied firmly. "You've hurt Lisa enough. She doesn't deserve this." Turning to me, Chris's expression softened. "Lisa, I'm so sorry. I had no idea things were this bad." I nodded, grateful for his support. "Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you standing up for me." Michael, now realizing the gravity of the situation, began to backtrack. "Chris, please. Let's talk about this. We can sort things out." Chris shook his head. "No, Dad. There's nothing left to sort out. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. He then dropped a bombshell that neither Michael nor I saw coming. And as for the house and the money, they're actually mine. Mom left them to me. So, you can't kick Lisa out or leave her with nothing. Michael's face went pale, the realization of his son's words sinking in. He was at a loss for words, the tables turned completely. I looked at Michael, then at Chris, feeling a mix of relief and empowerment. The truth was out, and I no longer had to bear the burden alone. Michael, it's over. I'm leaving, and I'm taking the steps to start my life over, without you, I said, my voice steady and resolute. What happened next? Michael's career as a preacher was ruined. Julia tried to make peace with me, but her tears didn't touch me anymore. She is now in the process of divorcing her husband, who is determined to leave her penniless. The path ahead was uncertain and undoubtedly challenging, but I was ready to face it head-on. I had found my voice and my strength, and with Chris's support, I knew I could overcome the trials ahead.